Good morning. Happy 4th of July. I like to play a little game. It's called Show Me the Racist. It goes by variations. Show me the racist. Show me the racism. And we're going to play that game this morning. This is a statement that was promulgated by the Supreme Court of California. So these are learned people. These are smart, intelligent, educated people who have long careers in the legal fields. They are well versed in all aspects of California law. They are knowledgeable in federal law. These are smart people. These are educated people. These are knowledgeable people. And they've put out this statement. In view of recent events in our communities and throughout the nation, we are at an inflection point in our history. It is all too clear that the legacy of past injustices inflicted on African Americans persists powerfully and tragically to this day. It's all too clear. They just said it's all too clear that it persists powerfully and tragically to this day. So they are going to show us specifically what this legacy is. They're going to point to the legacy. They're going to point to the law that's on the books that is still allowing injustices to be inflicted on African Americans. They're going to show us the person or persons, elected officials or bureaucratic officials who are committing injustice against African Americans tragically to this day. And if you believe that, boy, do I have a bridge to sell you. Each of us has a duty. We have a duty. I don't think they actually mean that we have a legal, cognizable duty. But that's a pretty powerful statement to recognize there is much unfinished and essential work. Okay, so now they're going to tell us what the unfinished and essential work is, right? That must be done to make equality and inclusion an everyday reality for all. So equality and inclusion, define those terms, please. Define the term. What do you mean by equality? Do you mean equality of opportunity? Do you mean equality of outcome? Do you mean equality under the law? Do you mean equality of income? What do you mean? There's a squirrel. The attack dog, Holly, is going to go kill it or something. Anyway, the French Revolution, they had the statements liberty, equality, and fraternity. And, of course, you can't have liberty and equality. It doesn't work, because if you give people liberty, somebody's going to make more money than you. That's just the way liberty works. If you give people the liberty to do their own thing, to make their own money, to carve out their own futures, some people are going to do it well. Other people are going to do it poorly. But you can see that this smacks strongly equality and brotherhood, liberty, equality, and fraternity. This is smacking of the French Revolution, which ended up with a lot of people getting guillotined. We must, as a society, I don't think that's a legal duty again, honestly recognize our unacceptable failings and continue to build on our shared strengths. So the Supreme Court is admitting that it has made failings. So they're going to tell you exactly which ones of their decisions that are no longer binding or valid. That's what they're going to do today. We must acknowledge that in addition to overt bigotry, who's overt bigotry? Inattention. Wait. Like, I have to give people attention? I'm somehow, if I don't give them attention, that's racism? Complacency. I have to be active? Have allowed tacit toleration of the intolerable. That is a terrible, terrible way of phrasing that. So we tolerate something that can't be tolerated. I don't know how that works, because if it's tolerable, then you can tolerate it. If it's intolerable, then you can't tolerate it. These are burdens particularly borne by African Americans, as well as indigenous peoples, singled out for disparate treatment in the United States Constitution when it was ratified. When it was ratified. When it was ratified. That was what, 230-ish years ago now? 230 years ago, kids, African Americans and indigenous peoples were singled out for disparate treatment. 230 years ago. And it wasn't actually necessarily African Americans, it was slaves. Slaves counted for 3/5 of a person. Free African Americans, I believe, were treated just like everybody else, but in the northern states anyway, in the non-slave states, there was no law, at least no constitutional provision against black people being free. So there you go. Let's ignore that, shall we? We have an opportunity in this moment to overcome division. To overcome division. How can we I don't understand. Are you talking about a division in the law? A division in society? How are we going to overcome a division in society? If two people have different beliefs, if person A believes that there is ongoing systemic racism and person B believes there is not ongoing systemic racism, how are we going to overcome that division? Unless one of the two people changes their minds, you won't overcome that division. So unity is not necessarily a good thing, especially if there are questions still to be asked as to whether or not something exists or does not exist. To accept responsibility for our troubled past. Who is our? And what do you mean by our troubled past? Was I convicted of a racist attack when I was younger that I just forgot about? Were you convicted of a racist attack when you were younger that you forgot about? Or are you collectivizing us into something that is unified with our ancestors? And if so, where does that unification end? Does it end at the beginning of the country? So is it just people who can trace their direct ancestry back to the beginning of the country? Or is it people who are here now who happen to be Americans are tarred by the, I mean, if you're a fresh immigrant, let's say you just immigrate from Poland, are you somehow responsible for our troubled past at that point? And like I was saying, when do you go back to? Do you go back to the founding of the United States? Do you go back to the founding of the colonies? Do you go back to, I don't know, the founding of Britain as a empire, the British Empire? Do you go back to England, the founding of England? Where do you go back to? Do you only go back to it on the European side? Or do you go back to it on the African side? Do you address what was happening in North Africa all the way up to almost 1900 with the enslavement of white people, Europeans and Americans? One of the first wars that we fought was against Morocco because they were attacking our trade ships and enslaving our people, the sailors on those ships. So are we going to address that? So I don't understand what you mean by our troubled past. This is just word salad that they're pumping out. Honestly, it is completely meaningless so far. They haven't provided a single tangible example that we can look at, that we can say, this is the racism. They're not doing that at all. And we could forge a unified future for all who share devotion to this country and its ideals. That's a meaningless statement. Forge a unified future. I mean, we are the United States of America. Have we stopped being the United States of America? We state clearly and without equivocation that we condemn racism in all its forms. Well, congratulations. Virtue! Virtue, where are you? Virtue! Virtue! I mean, who does not condemn racism in all its forms? I mean, you're going to find a very small list of people who are actually going to suggest that they don't condemn racism in all its forms. But what forms of racism are there? Conscious racism. Well, you know what? If somebody is racist, if a person is racist, they're just racist. I mean, they're allowed to be racist in the United States. As far as I know, it is not illegal to be a racist. It certainly isn't good for your career to be a racist. Nobody wants to be labeled a racist. I mean, the KKK is down to something like 3,000 members in the United States, of which I would assume most are just FBI agents trying to infiltrate it. The biggest Klan rallies that you get have like less than a dozen Klan members in it. The Klan is essentially dead. So you don't have a whole lot of conscious racism going on nowadays. And no, don't show me some website where some idiots trying to get a reaction by dropping N-bombs or something like that. That's not racism. That's just baiting. That's just being a troll. Unconscious racism. What the hell is unconscious racism? Racism, as I understand it, is the belief that one race is superior to other races, or a preference for one race over other races. Basically, it's looking at the races and making decisions based on the race of the person involved rather than other characteristics of the person. Like, who am I gonna pick for my handball team? I want Timmy and not LaQuisha. Now, if you just assigned a race to either Timmy or LaQuisha, you're the racist. So I don't believe there is such a thing as unconscious racism. And if someone wants to try to argue with me about that, I'd be fine with it. But I don't believe that exists. You can't make an unconscious decision based on race. Institutional racism. Well, we have laws against institutional racism, don't we? We have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Civil Rights Act of 1968. There's a couple Civil Rights Acts in the 1970s and 80s. I think we've had Civil Rights Acts even up through the 90s. I don't remember all the Civil Rights Acts. There have been so many. States have their own Civil Rights Acts. California has its own Civil Rights Act. I've been wrong about about this. I've been stating it wrong. It is going to be on the ballot in 2020. The Repeal Proposition 209 Act. Section 31, Article 1 of the California Constitution currently reads that the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. So schools, public schools, from grade school, kindergarten, grade school, preschool, all the way up through University of California, the whole UC system, you can't discriminate based on race or ethnicity. And they want to repeal this act. It's been in place since 1996. So, who is supporting this? Who is supporting repealing a statement that says the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting? Who's in favor of this? It appears the Democrat Party is in favor of this. And interestingly enough, the University of California Board of Regents is in favor of it. The Los Angeles County Board of Education is in favor of it. And strangely enough, the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus is in favor of it. Now, here's what's going to happen, kids. Once this legislation is repealed, once this constitutional change is made, the University of California Board of Regents, which already discriminates against Asians have to get much higher scores, SAT scores and grades than even white people. I mean, Asians have the hardest time. They have the strictest academic standards to be accepted into universities. Now, once they repeal this, the UC Board of Regents will be able to do that even more blatantly. And they're going to do it to favor African Americans to get in. They're going to take less qualified candidates, and they're going to reject more qualified candidates strictly on the basis of race, because I don't know. And it could be a brand new, fresh off the boat Asian that has just, came over when the kid was like 3. I'm going to call it a she just because parents work hard every day at low wage jobs, minimum wage jobs, maybe at a convenience store or something, just working their asses off 24/7 to be able to spend the money, to be able to get the money to put their kid through school, making their kid come home every day living above the convenience store where they work, making that kid come home every day to study her ass off in hopes of someday getting a college degree and being able to live the American dream. That child, when she applies to UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Davis, is going to have substantially higher grades. You can see it already in Harvard. It's something like 400 points more than an African American. Will Smith's kids. Will Smith, super rich, super famous, has all the money in the world. His kids will benefit from this legislation. Now, I know the counter argument. I know the counter argument is that, well, most black people aren't able to go to college. It's substantially skewed. There's this gap in college acceptance. There's a gap in high school test scores. There's a gap in SAT scores. There's a gap. There's all these gaps, and it's the racism of the gaps. And it would be racist to say that black people can't overcome those gaps, because, and I'm saying it's racist to say that because black people do overcome those gaps. There are black attorneys out there. There's a black Supreme Court justice out there. Barack Obama was teaching constitutional law. Black people can and do make it into universities. There are smart black people out there, you racists. There are talented black people out there. There are black people out there who are dedicated to study and learning. They're disciplined. They can do it. And what happens when you start saying, we're going to let less qualified black people in. We're going to let less qualified black people get these degrees. We're just going to pass these less qualified black people. Then people are going to say, well, this black person who came out of college isn't going to be as smart or as educated as a Asian person who came out of college, because the Asian person who came out of college had to have like 400 points higher on their SAT. They had to have much better grades. They had to be much more disciplined, much more intelligent. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that black person came in with perfect SATs and a 4.5 grade point average, having been in the ROTC and Eagle Scout and whatever. You don't know that. All you know is that the state is discriminating in favor of black people if this gets passed, and that black people are going to have an easier time to get in and an easier time to get out of school. This is going to promote racism. Right now, a black person graduates, a white person graduates, an Asian person graduates from a California school. They probably all deserve to go to that school, and they probably all deserve to graduate from that school. But once they're accepting people and passing people solely on the basis of skin color, then you can no longer make those statements. You can't. The the college degree loses its meaning. It loses its value. It loses its predictive kind of force. I was going to college before this was repealed, or before this was put in. This was in 1996. And I was in college in 1996. And I remember when I was going to school, I went to UC Davis. We would get a bumper crop. I called them a bumper crop of black students every year. There would just be a bunch of black students coming in, freshman class, and halfway, well, we were on quarters at UC Davis. I don't know if they still are. But after that first quarter, we would lose about half of them. Black males would drop out faster than the black females would. But by the end of it, by graduation, the numbers of black students had diminished drastically, because what they were doing is they were trying to make the numbers match. They were trying to make the number of applicants of whatever race match or go beyond some arbitrary figure. We need at least 20% black students in each class. And so they would take less and less and less well qualified black students to try to meet that quota. And I swear to God, all it did for these students is it gave them some student debt, and they got nothing from it. I mean, the ones who actually were justified in being there, the black students who actually had done the work and who were smart enough and who were disciplined enough to study and all that other fun stuff. I mean, they made it. But the ones who weren't qualified enough, the ones who were there just to get that quota up, that acceptance quota, they got nothing out of it. They got nothing out of it. They got a semester of school debt, maybe two. I mean, maybe some of them hung around for that first full year. Pretty much if you made it through the first year, you were going to go on to graduate. But it was just terrible. It was just terrible. It was terrible to see. So anyway, against it, opponents, we've got some Republicans because, Ling Chang, I'm sure, is a terrible, terrible racist. Melissa Melendez, I'm sure, is a terrible, terrible racist. Melendez is a very, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant name. It's just built on partial evidence and shallow perceptions for an unrealistic utopia. Yeah, I mean, this is it. Wen Fa, Stephen Choi, Ling Chang, Haibo Huang. I haven't read these, but it is. I can see why Asians are going to be against it. I really can. I really can. It's. I'm not going to say it's racial. I'm going to say it's cultural, because I can't say it's racial. But East Indians and Indian Indians and Eastern Asians, they come in and they just smash it in our school systems. They do great. They do great because they have whatever it is, that desire to succeed, that determination, the home life, the stable home life, whatever they're doing, they do well. So, yeah, all right. So institutional racism, structural racism. What the hell is structural racism? I mean, this is word salad at this point. Historic racism. Yeah, that was in the past. Welcome to 2020. It is, in fact, current year. And current year, we've had the Civil Rights Acts now for almost 60 years. 56 years of Civil Rights Acts. That's almost 3 generations of Civil Rights Acts. 2 to 3 generations of people who have benefited from these Civil Rights Acts. And continuing racism. Who is doing the continuing racism? We're back. I'm looking at you, Supreme Court of California. Isn't it your job under the old Proposition 209 to make sure that the state was not discriminated against people for public employment, public education, or public contracting? Where have you been, Supreme Court of California? Why have you been lax in your duties? We say this as persons who believe all members of humanity deserve equal respect and dignity. All members of humanity deserve equal respect and dignity. That is some bullshit right there. Adolf Hitler is a member of humanity, for better or worse, and he does not deserve equal respect and dignity. Charles Manson does not deserve equal respect and dignity. Jeffrey Dahmer does not deserve equal respect and dignity. Respect is earned. Dignity is something that you have or don't have. You don't deserve respect unless you've earned respect. You can act with dignity or not. As citizens committed to building a more perfect union, okay, what is the flaw? Show me the flaw. And as leaders of an institution whose fundamental mission is to ensure equal justice under the law for every single person. You're saying that there is conscious, unconscious, institutional, structural, historic, and continuing racism, and yet you are the leaders of an institution whose fundamental mission is and has been to ensure equal justice under the law for every single person. How have you failed, California Supreme Court? How have you failed? What have you failed to do? Explain your failure. Show us the decision or decisions that you made wherein you did not ensure equal justice under the law. Show me. In our profession and in our daily lives, we must confront the injustices. Yes, you are a Supreme Court justice. You must confront injustices that have led millions to call for a justice system that works fair to everyone. So here they tacitly agree. They don't even tacitly agree. They explicitly agree that these millions calling for a justice system have a point. They're saying that those injustices exist. Show me the injustices. Show me the injustice system, the injustices in the justice system. Show them to me with specificity. Each member of this court, along with the court as a whole, embraces this obligation. Virtue! As members of the legal profession sworn to uphold our fundamental constitutional values, we will not and must not rest until the promise of equal justice under the law is, for all of our people, a living truth. So they're saying that they have not been providing equal justice under the law. They're saying here that their fundamental constitutional values requires them to give equal justice under the law, and they have not done so. Which opinions failed to give equal justice under the law? Why have you been ignoring your fundamental constitutional values? Why have you been failing this hard? Anyway, that's the basis of my rant. I am saddened to see certain voices on the, I guess I'll call them right, Stephen Molyneux and AIU, Atheism is Unstoppable, have been banned from YouTube. I think that is borderline criminal. I do believe strongly in free speech. I'm not a fan of Molyneux, and I disagree heavily with some of the things that AIU says. But I strongly and fervently believe that they have every right to say it, and that people should hear it. There is a problem. Everywhere I turn to, there is a problem with echo chambers. I know that I'm involved in my own echo chambers. I try very hard to listen to people I disagree with, to divest myself of some of the trappings of an echo chamber, but it's just kind of inevitable. That's the way humans work. But you've seen this on Twitter. The right's been banned from Twitter. I mean, anybody really of note on the right has been banned from Twitter. So they've all gone to other sites, Parler, and there was another one that was popular for a while, Minds, and Gab, I think. And now Twitter's is just this echo chamber of hate. YouTube is following course. They are excising from themselves, I should say, people who they disagree with. Hate speech is what they call it. They say that Molyneux and AIU were calling for violence against peoples. I never saw that. I mean, on AIU, I did see him from time to time get kind of loosey-goosey with the visuals. I mean, I did see some nipples and things like that on his videos from time to time, but I never once saw him call for violence. In fact, I saw him take stands against violence. Stephen Molyneux, again, I never really watched him. I can't really handle him. But that's just me. I still think he has a right to speak. And from the people that I've heard of, that I trust, their opinion on him, they say that he never called for violence. So I have no reason to believe otherwise. It's just a shame. It's just a shame that we are where we are. Now, on this 4th of July, I know this has been a long video so far. And if you've made it this far, I want to say happy 4th of July. I hope you go out and celebrate it. I think this is a great country, and we've come a long way. I want to point out that although there is a huge narrative right now saying that for some reason we are a racist nation, I want to point out the things that we have done to fight racism. The Union, the side that won the Civil War, the Americans who won the Civil War, shed over 300,000 lives. 360,000 or more Union soldiers died in the Civil War to free the slaves. 360 plus thousand Union soldiers shed their lives to free slaves. That doesn't count. That doesn't count all the Union soldiers who were wounded, lost arms, legs, eyes, lived in pain from gunshot wounds. Doesn't count those. Doesn't count the people who just fought and were lucky enough, blessed enough that they didn't get injured. Families were torn apart to free slaves. America paid a blood debt to free the slaves. I don't believe that there is a need for reparations at this point. And again, that was in the past. The past is the past. The people of the past paid the debt for the sins of the past. Confederate soldiers, some 300 and some odd thousand Confederate soldiers died. That doesn't count those who were injured. They paid a debt with their blood and their lives as well. They suffered for their sins, as it were. The United States stood up to fascism. We spent another almost 300,000 lives in World War II fighting fascism. We put our money where our mouth is. We fought communism. As misguided as it may have been in Korea and in Vietnam, I don't think Korea was misguided. I think maybe we shouldn't have stopped, but I don't think Korea was misguided. Vietnam, which I believe was misguided. But we fought communism. And communism, for those of you out there who are under some misconception about the terrible destructive force that communism is, it has killed more people than fascism. You can argue that had fascism been unchecked, fascism would have killed more. But either way, you had the fascists who were socialist, and you had the communists who were also socialist. They were just a different kind of socialist, killing each other and killing their own people. And it seems like both fascists and communists like to kill Jews. And so I condemn both fascism and communism and socialism full-throated. They're terrible people who do terrible things. And I'm glad the United States has not turned to socialism. But we paid debts, and we've done everything we can. We've passed the Civil Rights Acts, guaranteeing equality at sacrificing the right of people to associate with whom they want. At least in employment, you don't have that right. You have to hire without regard to the race of the person you're hiring. And I'm fine with that. But America has done that. America has done a lot to even the playing field, to remove racism. Show me one institution that is pro-racism. All you've got is going to be like the KKK. And like I said, 3,000 people out of 330 million people in the United States, you've got 3,000 people in the KKK. It is a nothing. Less than 0.01% of the population. It is nothing. Corporations are all on board, giving money, showing support. Black Lives Matter. This is not a racist country, despite what people want to tell you for their grievance mongering, for their victim mongering, for trying to get their victim bucks. You ask people what they want out of this, no, they don't know. Andrew Cuomo, you won. What do you want? They got nothing. Because despite racism being conscious, unconscious, institutional, historic, and continuing, it's none of those. No. Squirrel. Anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thanks for watching. Have a happy 4th of July. And remember, this is a great country.